Rank 1, intern. You arrive in Lyon at the end of October when the city smells of wet stone and chestnuts. You're 24. You have a master's degree in international law from Zagreb, and your conversational French is good enough for a bakery but not for a meeting. The contract is for 6 months with no option to renew, which in the language of international organizations means we haven't decided yet if we need you. The headquarters on the Rhone embankment is a gray concrete building that looks like a fortress designed by an accountant. At the entrance, security check, scanner, a photo ID where you look like someone arrested for petty hooliganism. Flags of 196 countries hang in the hallways. Interns are seated in a common room on the 3rd floor. A laptop, a password for the internal network, a task. Sort incoming requests from national bureaus. Half arrive without required fields, a third with typos, a third in Arabic, which you don't understand. You wait for someone to translate. No one is in a hurry. You're not a priority. At the next table is a guy from Ghana named Kofi, also an intern. He's been submitting documents for 2 years. You have lunch together in the cafeteria, where people from Peru, Norway, Pakistan, and Côte d'Ivoire sit at the same table, and everyone speaks English with an accent that makes every phrase sound a little different. You sorted through 62 requests today. 41 of them are stolen passports, stolen cars, routine stuff. You're not allowed to open the rest because you don't have clearance. By about the 3rd week, it hits you. The world's largest police organization doesn't arrest anyone. It has no handcuffs, no weapons, no authority to enter someone's home. It sends out notices requesting detention. It connects those with authority to those with information. And that's it. You reread the charter and find Article 3. The organization is strictly prohibited from interfering in matters of a political, military, religious, or racial nature. You don't yet understand the gaping hole this article creates between what is expected of Interpol and what Interpol can actually do. Rank 2, analyst. Your contract is renewed. You're placed at grade 8 out of 12. The grading scale here works like in any international organization, from grade 1, director, to grade 12, entry level. Between you and the decision makers lie 7 ranks and 3 hallways. Your salary is not subject to French income tax, but pension contributions are deducted from it for a system you'll gain access to in 30 years. You're transferred to the Command and Coordination Center. 3 operations centers in Lyon, Singapore, and Buenos Aires work in shifts around the clock without holidays. You finish at 11 p.m. and hand things over to Singapore. Singapore goes to sleep. Buenos Aires takes over. The world doesn't stop, and you are now part of the mechanism that keeps an eye on it. You work with a database of stolen and lost documents, 40 million records of passports floating around somewhere on the planet. Airlines and border services send requests through a secure network. You check, verify, and respond. The passport number matches, and you realize that the person currently going through security in Istanbul is flying on a document stolen 3 years ago in Bangkok. You send a signal. What they do with him on the other side, they won't tell you. You're a link in a chain that doesn't see where that chain leads. Night shifts are the strangest time. The room hums with air conditioners. Messages crawl across the screens. Next to you is a woman from Jordan who has been with the Amman police for 15 years. Across the table is a former investigator from Brazil. You are a lawyer from Zagreb who has never held a gun in your hands. And all 3 of you are doing the same thing. Reading text on the screen, making a decision, forwarding it on. One night, a match pops up on the screen for a man on the most wanted list. He was spotted at border control in Addis Ababa. You forward the data to the Ethiopian bureau, and 40 minutes later, confirmation arrives. Detained. You're sitting in Lyon, and 4,000 kilometers away, someone is being led down an airport corridor in handcuffs. You and the Brazilian finish your coffee in silence. You learn that on average, 9 red notices are canceled every day. Arrested, extradited, turned himself in. 9 stories that end somewhere, while you sit in an air-conditioned room in Lyon. Rank 3, Criminal Intelligence Officer. 2 years later, you're transferred to the Organized Crime Directorate. Your team coordinates an operation to disrupt human trafficking routes between Southeast Asia and Europe. 10 days, 12.5 countries, several thousand police officers on the ground. You're sitting in Lyon, compiling data in real time. An underground workshop in the suburbs of Bangkok, 32 people sewing clothes 18 hours a day, without documents, with no way out. A container at the port of Piraeus, a false bottom, 14 people inside, 3 of them minors. An apartment in Brussels, a recruiter with 3 phones and a database of 400 names. Every line in your report represents someone's search, someone's handcuffs, someone's scream at 5 in the morning. You start working directly with the national central bureaus. Each participating country maintains its own bureau, usually under the Ministry of the Interior, and this is the sole point of contact between the national police and headquarters. You quickly realize some respond in 3 hours, others in 3 weeks, and still others remain silent. You have no leverage. You can follow up, resend, or call, but you can't order them. Interpol doesn't order. Interpol asks. Your first assignment is the regional bureau in Abidjan. For 2 weeks in 40-degree heat, you teach local officers how to use the secure communications network. Half the equipment doesn't work. Communication goes through a satellite. The database runs on a mobile terminal that you connect to a generator because the power goes out twice a day. On the last evening, an officer from Ghana, with whom you've worked for the entire 2 weeks, shakes your hand and says that before you arrived, they checked passports manually, using paper lists. When you return to Lyon, the air-conditioned hall feels like an undeserved luxury. Rank 4, Operational Coordinator. You are added to the pool of specialists for rapid response teams. The first call is a terrorist attack, an explosion at a hotel complex in Nairobi, January. Kenyan authorities request assistance, and 36 hours later, the team departs from Lyon. Bomb technicians, biometric specialists, digital forensic experts, and victim identification experts. You are the coordinator. Everything found at the scene must be checked in real time against the General Secretariat's databases. On site, you set up a mobile terminal in a tent next to the destroyed building. The smell of smoke. People in uniform who haven't slept in 2 days. A wall riddled with shrapnel holes. You run fingerprints, photographs, and weapon serial numbers through the databases. Every match is a thread that the local police will pull further. After Nairobi, Sri Lanka, the Easter church bombings. Then Beirut. An explosion at the port, over 200 dead, half the city flattened by the shockwave. There's a different job there, identifying bodies. Interpol established standards for identifying disaster victims back in 1984. And you see how they work in practice. Data from relatives is collected from all over the world and cross-checked with what remains at the scene. You're communicating with colleagues from 20 countries, each of whom has brought their own piece of the puzzle. When the last name on the list is confirmed, you don't feel relief, but emptiness, because for someone, that name was a person, but for you, it's become a line in a closed case. Rank 5, Unit Head. You are 41. You lead a team of 12 people as part of a task force dedicated to verifying alerts and diffusions. Lawyers, police officers, and analysts from 6 countries. The task is to verify every incoming request for a red notice before it is published. To make sure there's a real crime behind it, not political persecution, not revenge, not a way to pressure someone who's fallen out of favor. Sounds simple. Every week requests come in that aren't about justice. A journalist wanted on fraud charges, but when you read the materials, you see that the fraud is a newspaper article that made someone uncomfortable. A businessman, an arrest warrant for tax evasion, but the amounts in the attached documents don't add up, and the judge was appointed the day before the warrant was issued. Opposition figure, charged with terrorism, but the wording matches the ruling party's press release word for word. You reject it. You request additional documents. You suspend this National Bureau's right to publish notices until the circumstances are clarified. And every time, they call you. Politely, insistently. They explain the context, saying you don't understand how their law works. You listen. You reread the materials. You reject it again. Sometimes, you let it pass, because formally everything is in order. And while you sense what lies behind the formality, you can't prove it. You know that somewhere, a person will be detained at the border based on a notification you let slip through, and maybe everything will be done by the book, or maybe not. Rank 6, Assistant Director. 2nd grade out of 12. There is one person between you and the Secretary General. The budget, strategy, relations with donor countries, speeches at the General Assembly, where representatives from 196 countries vote on procedural matters, while the real decisions are made in the hallways half an hour before the vote. You've learned things they don't teach in Zagreb, talking to a delegate from a country that has just elected a president under investigation by the International Criminal Court, explaining to the Minister of the Interior that his request for a red notice has been rejected, and explaining it in such a way that he doesn't recall his officer from headquarters the next day. Listening to criticism from human rights organizations that say Interpol allows authoritarian regimes to hunt down dissidents, and knowing that they are right, but not entirely, and that the difference between entirely and partially cannot be explained in a press release. In Singapore, at the Global Innovation Hub, they show you the results of the latest cybercrime operation. 5,500 arrests in 6 months, $400 million in seized assets. Voice phishing, romance scams, investment schemes. A syndicate operating out of Southeast Asia defrauded victims in 40 countries simultaneously. Operators called people, posed as police officers, sent fake IDs, and people transferred money because the voice on the line sounded convincing. You look at the operation map and think that the person you're coordinating the arrest of might be sitting in the coffee shop next door, working from a phone. At the assembly in November, you watch as they vote for the new Secretary General. You know that the candidate was agreed upon over the course of a year and a half behind closed doors, that the executive committee conducted a preliminary selection, that every major member state haggled for its own interests. The hall applauds. You applaud too. Rank 7, Director. You are 56. Your office is on the top floor of a building on the Rhone embankment. From the window, you can see the river, the bridge, and a part of the city that has become yours over the past 32 years, even though you never obtained French citizenship. You are an international civil servant. It sounds nice in the brochure. In practice, it means you belong to an organization, not a country. You head the Directorate of Police Services. Under your command are units dealing with terrorism, organized crime, cybercrime, human trafficking, and crimes against children. Hundreds of staff members from dozens of countries. You sign documents, approve operations, report figures. So many arrests, so many seizures, so many notices published. All the delegations, all the journalists, all the donors understand the figures. There is a person behind every figure, but you only tell yourself that. Once a year, the General Assembly. You stand behind the podium, speak in English, and are simultaneously translated into Arabic, French, and Spanish. The phrases have been polished by the legal department. The guy from Zagreb, who 32 years ago couldn't make himself understood at a working meeting, stands before the assembly and says exactly what's written in the handouts. Not a word more. After the session, the hotel bar. A young woman approaches you, an intern. She's just been hired. She asks what it's like. You order a whiskey. You could say that for 32 years you caught people without the right to arrest them. That you coordinated operations in which police officers from other countries died, while you wrote analytical memos. That you rejected notifications knowing that the person you protected from extradition might be guilty, or might not be, and you'll never know. That an organization with 140 nationalities, 4 working languages, and 0 bullets is held together by a single assumption, that 196 countries have agreed to pretend they trust one another. You finish your whiskey and tell her, wait until the end of your internship. Then you'll decide.